A new poll from Leger is shedding light on how Canadians feel about alleged Chinese government election meddling. Overall, they think the country's electoral system is safe, but a majority want the federal government to call an independent inquiry. The Prime Minister has punted that decision to a yet-to-be-named special rapporteur.
We are working to appoint that special rapporteur, that special independent expert, in the coming days or week. We're working extremely quickly on that.
As expected, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is not happy with the Prime Minister's approach.
I think Canadians of all political backgrounds are asking, what has Justin Trudeau got to hide?
Here to dig into this story are two former directors of the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, Richard Fadden and Ward Elcock. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining me.
Pleasure.
Mr. Elcock, I'd like to start with you if I could, and with this latest poll that 72% of Canadians polled support an independent inquiry, and 1/3 of them say the potential intervention by foreign states is so important that it greatly compromises the legitimacy of the election results. I know you've been opposed to the idea of a public inquiry. Does this change your view in any way?
No, it doesn't. I think the problems around a public inquiry are still there. I'm not sure the Canadian public, who knows relatively little about national security issues in any case, really understands the nexus of the issues, and my view hasn't changed.
Mr. Fadden, I know you've supported an inquiry, not necessarily based on public opinion polls, but the information that's been put into the public domain. At the moment, that decision will hinge on an as yet to be named special rapporteur. Based on where public opinion is going, what do you think the Prime Minister should do? Should he accelerate things a bit?
Well, I think he should. I mean, to the extent that we can get any information organized, structured, and that we can talk about before the next election, I think that would be very, very good. Whether that's possible or not, I don't know. But the way he's organized himself with, the Committee of Parliamentarians and the review agency, then the rapporteur, it seems to me that we've pushed things rather too far in the future to be particularly useful for the election.
So, Mr. Elcock, I want to get a sense of how you think Canadians should be viewing this story and the evidence or the lack of evidence, the facts and the lack of facts that's out there, because this entire conversation is being driven by leaked intelligence. How do you think Canadians and journalists should be interpreting that intelligence when we don't have a complete picture?
Well, intelligence, for starters, is not evidence. It's not fact. It's merely an indication of something, depending on the quality of the intelligence, the sources of the intelligence, and so on. And all of that we don't know. It's not something that the news media who have seen the documents know how to assess, so they haven't provided anything like that, any sort of assessment, are not capable of providing any sort of assessment. In the circumstances, my guess is that the information is, I guess my take on the information is that it's pretty thin gruel for the level of political problems that have been created by it. But I understand, partly because people don't understand much about national security in this country, that it assumes a larger, takes on a magnitude that people don't, because they don't understand it, takes on a greater magnitude.
So, Mr. Fadden, sort of the same question to you, because even some of the media outlets that are reporting this say they've not been able to independently verify these allegations. So, with all the caveats that are out there, how do you think other journalists and citizens at home should be consuming this?
Well, to use an old expression, where there's smoke, there's usually fire. I agree broadly with what Ward has just said, but there is so much smoke. And there has been similar smoke in a number of our closest allies. So it seems to me there's something here to worry about. I tend to agree with Ward that the political reaction is a bit exaggerated, but we shouldn't be surprised. I mean, our politics are becoming overly polarized, and it doesn't take a heck of a lot right now to send the hares running amongst the pigeons, or whatever the expression is. But I do think there's still value in having a public inquiry, if only in the end to educate Canadians. Ward is dead right when he says that we don't think or know a great deal about national security. But the way the world is going, I think we should use every opportunity we can to try and educate people about national security, if only people on the Hill, people in the media, and in the universities.
But Mr. Alcock, we see reports of specific allegations. This Liberal candidate was a witting agent of Beijing. This progressive Conservative member of the provincial parliament was a conduit for money. And it's based on intelligence and it's uncorroborated. How should people react to that? How seriously should they take these claims when there is no criminal investigation that we know of from the RCMP? I mean, how should we interpret those things?
Well, to work backwards, the problem is even if there were information in the leaks that could be prosecuted, the reality is because it's based probably on sensitive intelligence, there's probably never ever going to be a prosecution because you can't reveal the sensitive intelligence to make the prosecution useful. So the reality is there's never going to be a prosecution on any of these things. The intelligence that's there suggests there's a problem, and Dick's right. There has been a problem around foreign interference for a long time. This is not new news. It's been a problem for some time. This isn't actually all that dramatic, although it does show an increase over the years and has been an increase over the years in terms of foreign interference. How you actually deal with that is a lot more complicated because, as I said, prosecution is often very difficult. Often difficult to expel a diplomat because sometimes it isn't a diplomat that's doing it. So the solutions to it are complicated. I don't disagree with Dick that we need to have more discussion of national security issues. I'm just not sure that a public inquiry will deliver that.
Right. So Mr. Fadden, the same question to you. With these specific allegations, you know, if it's a criminal allegation, it leads to a process, right, where there's charges laid and a trial or no charges laid or a verdict of some sort that brings conclusion to it. Here we have politicians whose names are being associated with disloyal acts in some respect, and there seems to be no process to bring resolution to it because it's all based on uncorroborated intelligence. I mean, how should the public look at that?
Well, I think the first thing we should look at is what crimes we're dealing with here. Most of the crimes or the administrative violations arise from the Canada Elections Act. There is no specific criminal code crime in Canada of foreign interference. So you have to rely on other offenses. I think Ward is right. It's going to be very difficult to prosecute somebody under the criminal law. You can expel diplomats. If there are visiting people from other countries, you can cancel their visas and ask them to go. But having said all of this, you know, we need to develop some sort of procedure to protect people from false accusations as well. I think Ward is right when he says you cannot take at face value what are in these leaked intelligence assessments, even though I do believe there's something in most of them. You know, we just don't know what and how far it goes. But accusing individuals as opposed to being worried about foreign interference is another issue entirely. And for that, we do need some measure. We need some measures, some procedures, some process, whether it's a public inquiry or whether it's the rapporteur or one of these other committees that are looking at it. People shouldn't have to stand there waving in the wind, having been accused by leaked intelligence that they've done something. They may well have done it, but equally, they may well not have. So if the government does nothing else, you know, in the short to medium term, they should find a way, I think, to deal with accusations against individuals as opposed to problems with the process.
Yeah, so Mr. Alcock, how do you deal with something like that? I mean, these are potentially life-changing allegations against people, certainly career-changing potentially. How do you deal with something like this when it's in the public domain and no process around it?
That is a huge problem. Dick's right. It is one of the things that it is really important to, for example, to CSIS, because it provides intelligence to the government, but it provides it in a secure fashion so that individuals' rights are not affected, that this sort of information doesn't leak out. What the leaks have done is they've prosecuted people in the public domain without any real information or any ability to respond, which is really unfortunate. I was a little surprised that people have gone as far as identifying specific individuals who may or may not be mentioned in the leaked documents. That they've actually done that is to say the least, I would say, inadvisable.
So Mr. Fadden, as the last question, if you were still running CSIS, what would you be doing right now to deal with this? I mean, I've never seen anything like this in the short time that I've been in Ottawa. I don't know if you saw anything like this in terms of intelligence leaks in your career. How do you get a handle on this if you're running the intelligence service?
Well, there are always leaks. We've had leaks in the past. Our allies have had leaks in the past. But I've got to say that the quantity of the leaks that have been published over the course of the last little while are really very worrisome. It would be helpful if we could find out where they're coming from, but I also think it is wrong to assume, absent some proof to the contrary, that the leaks are coming from CSIS. CSIS material is distributed pretty widely, between departments, ministers' offices, the central agencies. So if our history is any indication, we're going to have a great deal of trouble finding out where the leaks have come from. I think we should try and find out. If I were the director of CSIS, I would really be urging my people to batten down the hatches and making sure that the leak doesn't come from there. But I think the people who are doing these leaks have done a great deal of harm because they're devaluing the value of intelligence, not just for you and I and Ward and others, but also for the people for whom it's destined, ministers and senior decision makers. So I'm not sure much is going to happen here. The only people who can be really happy about this at one level are the Chinese, because they're sowing political discord in Canada.
Mr. Alcock, just as a final point, do you think it's harmful that these leaks have come out if they have shone a light directly on the level of potential Chinese state interference in the election and perhaps identified some of the agents?
I think there has been a light shone on the issue for some time. It is not, as I said, a new issue. This has intensified it. Unfortunately, it's intensified it in a way which actually is detrimental both to the individuals who are being affected by it, but also to actually resolving this, which is unfortunate. But how you get people and governments to pay attention to national security is an issue that both Dick and I have struggled with over the years, and I still don't have an answer for, and I suspect Dick doesn't either.
Okay. Ward Alcock, Richard Fadden, thank you both so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Pleasure.